The man you are today is the father of the man you will become at 70. Read that again, slowly, because that sentence is not motivation. It is not a slogan. It is a biological and spiritual fact that most men spend their entire lives running from. Every habit you keep, every decision you avoid, every year you drift through without direction, you are fathering someone right now, and that someone is going to inherit everything you built and everything you neglected. The question is not whether that man will exist. He will. The question is what kind of man you are sending into those final decades. A man who is free, capable, and at peace with the life he lived, or a man who is fragile, bitter, and haunted by the ghost of everything he could have been but never became. Most men do not think about this. Not really. They think about next week, next quarter, the next problem sitting on their desk. The long view feels abstract until suddenly it is not abstract anymore. Until you are standing in a doctor's office at 58, hearing something you were not prepared to hear. Until you are watching your savings account tell you a story you do not want to read. Until you are lying awake at 3 in the morning with a life that looks fine from the outside and feels completely hollow from the inside. That hollowness has a name. It is the accumulation of decisions not made, conversations not had, standards not held, years not lived with intention. The philosopher Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." He wrote those words almost 2,000 years ago, sitting inside one of the most powerful empires the world had ever seen, surrounded by men with wealth and status and absolutely no idea what to do with the time they had been given. And nothing has changed. Not really. The distraction is shinier now. The excuses are more sophisticated, but the waste is exactly the same. Today, I am going to walk you through 7 decisions that could define the rest of your life. Not 7 tips, not 7 habits to try for 2 weeks. 7 decisions. The kind that, once made and actually acted on, change the entire trajectory of a man's existence. These are the decisions that separate the man who arrives at 70 with peace and presence and something real to leave behind, from the man who arrives with regret and a long list of things he meant to do. Every point in this video was written for a different part of you. Some of it will land softly, some of it will land hard. Let it land. Do not skip. Do not fast forward. The part you want to skip is probably the part you need the most. If this kind of conversation is what you have been looking for, hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you never miss something like this. Share it with the man in your life who is drifting and needs a moment of honest clarity. And let us begin. Drop this in the comments and mean every word of it. I am building my best self. Decision 1. Build your body before it begins to break. There is a man I want you to picture. He is 71 years old. He wakes up every morning and sits on the edge of his bed for a few minutes before he tries to stand. Not because he is lazy, because his body makes him negotiate now. Every morning is a small argument between his will and his joints. He cannot carry the things he used to carry. He cannot go where he used to go without planning. His world has not ended, but it has shrunk. Room by room, year by year, until independence itself has become something he has to ration carefully. Nobody told him this was coming, or maybe somebody did and he did not listen. Because at 35, at 40, the body feels like it will cooperate forever. It feels like something you can take for granted, like oxygen, like time itself. The motivational speaker Jim Rohn once said, "Take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live." That sentence sounds simple until you understand what it is actually describing. It is not describing aesthetics. It is not describing performance. It is describing sovereignty. The ability to remain present and capable in your own life for as long as possible. The ability to remain a participant rather than a spectator in the story of your family, your work, your existence. Here is something that most men do not hear clearly enough. Muscle mass peaks in your mid-30s. After that, without deliberate, consistent resistance training, you lose somewhere between 3 and 8% of it every decade. That does not sound frightening until you do the math and realize that the man who reaches 45 having done nothing to maintain his physical foundation has already quietly borrowed against the decades ahead. And it is not just the muscle, it is the cardiovascular system, it is the bone density, it is the hormonal environment that shapes your mood, your drive, your ability to think clearly under pressure. All of it is in a conversation right now, and the question is whether you are responding or going silent. Strength training is not about looking a certain way. It is about maintaining the biological infrastructure that makes everything else in your life possible. A man who is physically capable moves through the world differently. He tolerates stress more effectively. He sleeps with more depth. His confidence does not come from what people think of him. It comes from knowing that his body is working for him and not against him. The work itself is not complicated. 3 to 4 sessions of resistance training per week. Enough protein to give your muscles what they need to rebuild. Sleep treated not as a luxury, but as a biological requirement. Walking as a daily practice rather than an occasional event. These are not secrets hidden inside expensive programs. They are simple, unglamorous choices that most people know and very few people sustain. The question is not whether you know what to do. The question is whether you will start now, while there is still time to build something, rather than waiting until your body forces the conversation in a language that is much harder to ignore. An old man in a weak frame is a prisoner in his own home. That is not a metaphor. That is a clinical reality that plays out in millions of households every single day. The man who builds his body before it begins to break is not being vain. He is being wise in the most practical, irreversible way a man can be wise. If you are ready to take your body seriously, prove it right now in the comments. My body is my priority. Decision 2. Secure your freedom through disciplined capital. Let me tell you what financial desperation actually looks like. It does not look like poverty necessarily. It looks like a man who cannot say no, a man who stays in the meeting where he is being quietly humiliated because he cannot afford to walk away. A man who watches an opportunity appear, a business, a move, a chance to do something that actually aligns with who he is, and cannot take it because his margins are too thin to absorb any risk. A man who works not because the work means something, but because the stopping means catastrophe. That is not a money problem. That is a freedom problem, and it is one of the most common tragedies in the lives of men who never made the decision to build deliberately. The poet and essayist Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "A man in debt is so far a slave." Emerson was not talking about moral failure. He was talking about structural reality. Debt and financial fragility do not just affect your bank account. They affect your nervous system. They narrow your sense of what is possible. They make you risk-averse in ways that cost you opportunities you will never be able to calculate. Wealth, in the truest sense, is not about what you own. It is about what you can say no to. It is the ability to leave the job that is destroying you, to take the risk that could change everything, to spend your time on the things and the people that actually matter to you, rather than on the things you cannot afford to stop doing. Before 45, a man needs to make a real, sustained decision about his financial life, not a vague intention to save more someday. A decision, and a decision looks like action. It looks like getting out of consumer debt with the same urgency you would bring to a genuine emergency, because it is one. It looks like building an emergency fund large enough to give you real breathing room, not a symbolic cushion that disappears with one unexpected expense. It looks like investing consistently, even imperfectly, in assets that appreciate over time while you are living your life. It looks like learning the difference between spending that serves your future and spending that only serves your present comfort. The man who understands money as a tool for buying time and options lives in an entirely different psychological landscape than the man who treats it as something to be consumed as quickly as it arrives. One man feels the weight of every financial decision as a threat. The other makes choices from a position of genuine freedom. Pay yourself first, before the bills, before the discretionary spending, before the convenience and the comfort. Set aside something for the 65-year-old version of yourself who is either going to be grateful or desperate. That man is coming regardless. The only variable is what you are sending him. Every man who is done being financially trapped, type this below. I build wealth to buy freedom. Decision 3. Heal your own spirit. This is the point that men skip. Not because it does not resonate. It resonates immediately, deeply, in a place most men do not talk about in public. They skip it because engaging with it requires something that nobody prepared them for. It requires sitting with themselves in a way that is genuinely uncomfortable. It requires looking at patterns of behavior they have spent years explaining away. It requires admitting that some of what they carry is not strength. It is weight disguised as strength. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard observed, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." That sentence should stop you cold, because it is not describing dramatic crisis. It is describing the quiet erosion of authenticity that happens when a man spends decades performing a version of himself rather than actually inhabiting one. Every man carries wounds. Some carry them loudly. Most carry them in silence, behind competence and humor and relentless forward motion. The wounds of childhood, of loss, of betrayal, of being told in 100 small ways that who you actually were was not quite enough. Those wounds do not disappear with time. They go underground. They find new shapes. They come out in the way you parent, in the way you receive love or refuse it, in the standards you hold others to that are really just the standards that were held against you once long ago by someone who had no right to. The man who never does this work arrives at 60 with something that is hard to name but impossible to miss. A low-grade bitterness. A resentment toward life that he cannot fully articulate and that the people closest to him feel like a weather system. He is not a bad man. He is an unexamined one. And the examination he avoided at 35 is now costing him the peace he should be building at 60. Healing is not softness. I want to be precise about that because the word gets misused. Healing is not becoming someone without edges or opinions or the capacity for anger. Healing is becoming someone whose past is no longer driving. It is the difference between a man who responds and a man who simply reacts. Between a man who chooses and a man who just repeats. Therapy, honest reflection, spiritual practice, deep conversation with people who actually know you. Whatever form the work takes, the outcome is the same. You become lighter, not weaker, lighter. The energy that was being consumed by unprocessed pain becomes available for building. A quiet house at 70 is either a sanctuary or a prison. The difference has almost nothing to do with the house. If you are finally ready to put the past down, leave this in the comments. I choose healing over holding on. Decision 4. Master a craft until you are undeniable. There is a particular kind of invisibility that arrives for men who coasted. It does not happen suddenly. It is gradual. 1 year you are a reliable contributor. 2 years later, you are adequate. 3 years after that, someone half your age is doing what you do faster, cheaper, and with more energy. Not because they are more talented, but because they went deep and you stayed shallow. The artist and author Stephen McCraney once said, "The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried." That sentence matters because mastery is not about talent, and it is not about starting without fear. It is about continuing past the point where most people stop. It is about going through the phase where you are bad at something without quitting. through the phase where you are mediocre without convincing yourself that mediocre is fine, through the long, slow, unglamorous middle where improvement is real but invisible, right up until the day it suddenly becomes undeniable. To be useful is to be relevant. That is not a corporate phrase. It is a fundamental truth about the relationship between skill and security. The man who has built something genuinely rare, a capability that cannot be easily replicated or replaced, has a kind of stability that no title can give him and no layoff can fully take away. His value is not dependent on someone else's organizational chart. It lives inside him. The mistake is breadth without depth. We live in a culture that rewards the performance of knowledge. The man who can speak fluently about many things impresses people at dinner. But impression is not the same as impact. And impact, at the level that creates real security and real meaning, comes from depth. From going so far into something that you begin to see what others cannot see because they stopped too early. Before 45, choose your craft deliberately. Not the thing that sounds impressive. The thing you are willing to be bad at for a long time in order to eventually be undeniable. Leadership, a technical skill, writing, physical craft, financial analysis, teaching. Whatever it is, the path is the same. Show up when it is not exciting. Do the work when no one is watching. Go deeper when the surface becomes comfortable. Skill is the only currency that does not inflate. And the man who knows, when everyone around him is guessing, carries himself with a quiet certainty that cannot be performed and cannot be purchased. It is built in the hours nobody sees. Show me you are serious about mastery. Write this right now. I go deep or I go home. Decision 5. Prioritize character over reputation. At some point in a man's life, if he is paying attention, he starts to notice something uncomfortable. The person he is in public and the person he is in private are not exactly the same. Not dramatically different, maybe. Not dishonest in any grand, obvious way. But there is a gap, a performance layer, a version of himself he maintains for the benefit of an audience that he is not entirely sure he even respects. The civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. declared, "The time is always right to do what is right." That declaration was made in the context of social justice, but it carries a personal truth that goes far beyond politics. The right thing in the context of a man's inner life is often the thing he keeps delaying, the conversation he has not had, the standard he has not held himself to in private, the gap he has not yet closed between who he appears to be and who he actually is. Reputation is social. It is what you project. Character is structural. It is what holds when there is no audience. And here is the thing about character that makes it different from reputation. You cannot fake it indefinitely. Reputation can be maintained through performance and careful management of what people see. Character reveals itself in the unguarded moments, in how you treat people who can do nothing for you, in what you say about someone when they are not in the room, in whether you keep your word when breaking it would go unnoticed, in the kind of man your children are experiencing when you are tired and no one is performing. Men who spend their energy building reputation at the expense of character become exhausted in a specific way. They are always managing, always making sure the image is coherent, always keeping the stories straight. And there is an anxiety underneath that life that no amount of external success fully quiets, because they know, in the place where you always know, that the foundation is not solid. Men who build character live lighter, not because their lives are easier, but because they have less to maintain. The private version and the public version are close enough to each other that there is no cognitive weight involved in being themselves. A man with a clean conscience sleeps on stone as if it were silk. That image has stayed with me for years because it describes something real. The most materially comfortable life built on internal dishonesty produces less genuine peace than the simplest life built on something true. Before 45, close the gap. Not perfectly, that is not the standard, but genuinely. Look at the places where your private self and your public self diverge and ask what it would cost to bring them closer together. The cost is almost always less than you fear, and the relief is almost always more than you expect. If you are done performing for people who do not matter, type this: I choose character over applause. Decision 6. Let go of the trivial. By the time a man reaches 45, if he has been at all honest with himself, he has accumulated a fairly clear record of what his energy has been spent on. And a significant portion of it, for most men, went to things that did not matter, arguments that produced nothing, grudges that outlived their relevance by years, the obsessive tracking of what someone else was building, earning, or saying, the need to win exchanges that no one was watching. The replaying of conversations that ended long ago with people who stopped thinking about him before the week was out. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Marcus Aurelius was not writing philosophy from a comfortable distance. He was writing it while running an empire, managing wars, navigating betrayal, and watching people he loved die. He was writing it from inside the chaos, as a reminder to himself that the only domain he could actually govern was the one between his ears. And that is the insight that changes everything about how you spend your attention after 40. You cannot control what people think of you. You cannot control whether you are treated fairly. You cannot control the economy or the timing or the decisions other people make that affect your life. But you have complete authority over where your attention goes. And attention is not infinite. It is your most non-renewable resource. Every hour spent in a battle that yields no territory is an hour not spent building. Every night you lie awake angry about something that cannot be changed is a night your body does not recover the way it needs to. Every relationship you damage through pettiness is one less relationship available to sustain you when the real difficulties arrive. If a conflict does not change the actual landscape of your life in a meaningful way, it does not deserve your blade. Not because you are weak, because you are strategic, because you have finally understood that not every provocation requires a response, and not every wrong requires your personal correction. This is not about becoming passive. Some battles are worth everything you have. Some lines must be held at real cost. The wisdom is in the distinction. The man who has learned to make that distinction quietly, without drama, without the need for others to recognize how restrained he is being, operates at a level of effectiveness that men who fight everything simply cannot reach. Simplify your conflicts deliberately. Protect your attention as you would protect capital. Because it is capital, it is being spent right now, whether you intend it or not. Claim this out loud in the comments. Let the right people see it. My energy is too valuable to waste. Decision 7. Speak the truth, especially when it is inconvenient. Everything we have talked about today leads here. Every decision, every commitment, every internal reckoning and external discipline, all of it rests at its deepest foundation on one thing, on whether you are willing to be honest. With yourself first, then with the people who matter, then with the world about who you actually are and what you actually stand for. The American author Mark Twain famously said, "If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything." That sounds like a quip. It is actually a precise description of a physiological and psychological reality. Dishonesty has a maintenance cost. Every lie, even the small, comfortable ones, requires memory. It requires consistency. It requires supporting lies to keep the first one standing. And the weight of that maintenance, carried across years and decades, is exhausting in a way that is very difficult to separate from just feeling like life is heavy. The man who has built his life on managed truths and comfortable fictions reaches a point where he cannot remember what he actually thinks. where his own opinions are unclear to him because he has spent so long calibrating them for the room, where his identity is something he performs rather than inhabits. And relationships built on that managed version of him have a hollowness to them that he can feel even when the other person cannot name it. A life built on lies is a house built on sand. That is not poetry, that is engineering. The structure may stand for a long time, it may look impressive from the outside, but sand shifts, and when the ground moves, which it always does, the foundation reveals itself. Integrity is what holds when the ground shakes, and the ground always shakes. Health crises, financial ruptures, relationship breakdowns, the losses that arrive without announcement and demand everything you have. The men who move through those moments with their sense of self intact are almost always the men who had something real to stand on, who did not have to suddenly invent a self under pressure because they had been living close to one all along. Speaking the truth is not brutality. It is not the weaponizing of honesty against the people who love you. There is a false version of truth-telling that is really just selfishness wearing philosophical clothes, and it causes more damage than the silence it replaces. What it is, in its genuine form, is the willingness to have the real conversation. The one you have been postponing. The one where you say what you actually see, what you actually feel, what you actually need, with care and compassion, but without the editing that protects your comfort at the expense of your integrity. The truth costs something, but it is a one-time cost. The alternative bills you every single day. If this point hit you the hardest, be honest about it. Drop this below. I choose truth over comfort. Let me bring this home. The man you are today is still the father of the man you will become at 70. That has not changed since the first sentence of this video. But something else may have changed. Something in the way you are sitting with that truth right now compared to how you were sitting with it at the beginning. 7 decisions, not 7 aspirations. Not 7 things to add to a list you revisit annually and forget by February. 7 decisions that require something from you today in the actual texture of your actual life. Build your body before it begins to break. Secure your freedom through capital you build with intention rather than desperation. Do the internal work of healing because the wounds you carry do not disappear. They only find new targets. Master something deeply enough that your value becomes something no one can easily take from you. Choose character over the performance of it. Release the battles that yield nothing. And speak the truth, especially when it is inconvenient, and especially when it costs you something. The Harvard psychologist and philosopher William James wrote, "The greatest revolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives." He was not writing a motivational poster. He was describing something he had observed in himself and in others across decades of careful attention. That the decision to change, made genuinely and acted on consistently, produces outcomes that pure circumstance never could. Regret is a ghost that haunts the idle. The man who begins to build today, not perfectly, not without setbacks, but genuinely and with increasing clarity about what he is building toward, generates something over time that accumulates the way compound interest accumulates, quietly, consistently, and then suddenly, powerfully, in ways that surprise even him. You do not need to have been perfect up until this moment. No man has been. The past is a fixed point. What happens next is not. The 70-year-old version of you is being constructed right now, brick by brick, decision by decision, in this moment, in what you choose to do when this video ends. He is either going to look back at this day as the day something finally shifted, or he is going to wonder, in that quiet, devastating way that old men wonder, what might have happened if you had taken it seriously when you still had time? You still have time. Take it seriously. If this video reached you in a place that actually matters, share it with someone who needs it. Because you know someone right now who is drifting, who is at a crossroads, who might watch something like this and finally make the decision they have been avoiding for years. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, and tell me which of the 7 decisions hit you the hardest. I read every single one. I will respond to every single one. And make this your declaration starting today. Legacy starts today. The 1% do not wait for perfect conditions. They do not wait until they feel ready. They act before the sun sets on another day that could have meant something. Be in that 1%. The clock is already moving. The man at 70 is already being built. The only question left is whether you are building him deliberately or leaving him to chance. Choose deliberately, starting now.